Well, welcome to this edition of the 700 Club. We've got a shocking story for you. The United States government is breeding mouse humans with your taxpayer money. You will not believe it, but that's coming up on this program. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu strikes out no new government for Israel. And how will his rival Benny Gantz respond? And what will happen in the fight against terrorism if Gantz draws support from Arab parties? Our Chris Mitchell brings us the critical details from Jerusalem.
Netanyahu returned the mandate to form a government shortly after sundown at the end of the Jewish high holy days.
Since I received the mandate, I've worked tirelessly both in public and behind the scenes to establish a broad national unity government. That's what the people want. It's also what Israel needs in response to the security challenges that increase by day and by the hour.
Netanyahu released a video explaining that he had repeatedly approached blue and white leader Benny Gantz, his partner Yair Lapid, and Israeli Beitenu leader Avigdor Lieberman.
Gantz, Lapid, and Lieberman only talk about unity. In practice, they do the complete opposite. They encourage division and boycott. They reject the religious.
Israelis went to the poll for the second time in 6 months in September after Netanyahu failed to pull together a government of a majority of Knesset members. According to the law, President Rivlin has 3 days to decide if he'll give the mandate to Gantz, who would then have 28 days to try to form a unity government. It's the first time since Netanyahu was elected in 2009 that another leader could be asked to form a government, though Gantz's chances of succeeding are slimmer. Blue and White released a statement saying, Blue and White is determined to create the liberal unity government led by Gantz that the people elected a month ago. Gantz has less backers than Netanyahu, but could also try to build a minority government that would be supported from the outside by the Arab parties, who deny Israel's right to exist. Netanyahu warned against this. If Gantz takes up the challenge to form a new government and fails after 28 days, there's another option. If any Knesset member can bring together a majority of Knesset members, they could become the next prime minister. If that fails, Israelis will head to new elections, probably next March. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, in other news, the president says he might leave some troops in Syria to protect, guess what, the Kirkuk oil fields that we've been talking about on this program on and on and on. But some members of Congress want him to do more. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington.
Thanks, Pat. The Turkish and Russian presidents met today in the Black Sea resort town of Sochi. Their talks are crucial in extending a ceasefire set to expire today, and as Syrian Kurds fear the Turkish slaughter may resume. Gary Lane has the story.
With the ceasefire set to end later today, there's concern the Turks will restart their onslaught against the Kurds. As U.S. troops continue their pullout, there's word that a small force might remain. When Vladimir Putin met with Turkey President Erdogan Tuesday, the Russian president said Turkey had violated Syrian sovereignty. The U.S. troops were seen leaving northeastern Syria and heading to Iraq on Monday. They were bid farewell by angry Kurds who threw potatoes at them. Some held signs thanking the American people but saying that, quote, Trump betrayed us. They might not be welcome in Iraq either, as that government says there's no agreement for them to stay there. Appearing on the Fox News show Hannity, the president said a ceasefire agreement would not have been reached without 2.5 days of fighting.
It's like two kids in a playground. They fight, you let them fight for a minute, and then you pull them apart. It was much easier to make a deal.
President Trump suggests he does not regret his decision to withdraw American troops from Syria.
We have a good relationship with the Kurds, but we never agreed to, protect the Kurds. We fought with them for 3.5 to 4 years. We never agreed to protect the Kurds for the rest of their lives.
And at the start of his cabinet meeting Monday, Mr. Trump said some residual American troops, maybe 200 or so, would remain inside Syria to protect Israel and Jordan in southern Syria and oil fields in the east. But Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the U.S. is ready to use military action in the region if necessary. Some fighting continued despite the ceasefire. CBN News contributing correspondent Chuck Holton came under fire inside Syria as he and medics of the Free Burma Rangers rescued wounded Kurds.
We've been moving down the road into territory that's held by the Free Syrian Army. Right now, an hour ago, they shot at us with 3 machine guns, and we had to flee, and then now we're close. We're going right back.
Under terms of the ceasefire, the Kurds have agreed to leave a safe zone south of the Turkish border. President Erdogan says only 800 Kurdish fighters have left the area. 1,300 remain. Turkey has warned Kurdish militias must honor the agreement.
If they don't withdraw, our operation will restart.
The challenge now is reaching a permanent deal. Since the Turkish military offensive, Operation Peace Spring, began October 9th, more than 150,000 people have fled the fighting in northern Syria. Hundreds, if not thousands, have been killed or injured. CBN's Operation Blessing is helping many of the internally displaced inside northeast Syria. And more than 10,000 refugees have now crossed into Iraqi Kurdistan. OB is partnering with the Barzani Charitable Trust Foundation to provide hot meals to people in 2 camps there. And the German defense minister today suggested the security zone in northern Syria be controlled by the international community, including Russia and Turkey. Gary Lane, CBN News.
Thanks, Gary. Pat?
Well, we're giving back what has taken years and years to build up. We had control of that area. Now the Russians are coming in. The Turks are coming in. We've lost control of it, and it's a humanitarian disaster. And that's just the way it is. But given that reality, we're at CBN are working with the Barzani Charitable Foundation to provide meals and necessary help to these Kurdish and Christian refugees who are being forced to flee because of this bitter fighting. And we're giving, we have clean water, we have blankets, we have hot meals, we have the things that they need so badly. And we need much more help. And if you want to be participating in that, it's CBN Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund, CBN Center, and that's the number to call, 1-800-700-7000. We want to do everything we can to stand with those brave people, even though they may have well been betrayed by our nation. John.
Pat, pro-life advocates decry the hundreds of thousands of abortions performed in America every year, but the tragedy doesn't stop there. Intact parts of the child's body are in high demand among scientists, and as Jennifer Wishon explains in this alarming report, you may need to sit down when you hear who's paying for their experiments.
Organs, bones, and other body parts of aborted babies are being sold and transplanted into lab animals. No, this is not a passage out of Frankenstein. These are real experiments happening now that taxpayers are funding.
It's abhorrent on so many levels.
Anthony Bellotti is president and founder of White Coat Waste Project, a group exposing experiments like this. Here, the reproductive tracts from aborted 13-week-old twin girls were stripped out and implanted into mice. Last year, the National Institutes of Health funded 200 similar studies across 50 institutions, mostly universities, in 33 states. This year, the NIH estimates it will spend $120 million tax dollars on research using aborted baby parts.
But this is a crisis now. This problem is growing in spite of Republicans, Democrats, pro-lifers, animal advocates. Nobody wants this.
Teresa Bukovac runs Pro-Life San Francisco. The bulk of the research happens in her backyard at the University of California, San Francisco.
One of the most infamous projects that was recently canceled by the Trump administration was a project that involved humanizing mice. And that project required 2 pristine, healthy fetuses between the ages of 18 and 24 weeks per month.
Nearly 70 members of Congress from both parties are working to expose these gruesome experiments. They've issued a letter demanding information from Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar.
You're asking him to indicate how many different babies were used in each project and the gestational ages of each. Can you believe that you're even having to write a letter like this?
It is deeply saddening to me that our own government would be a part of creating this marketplace for the buying and selling of baby parts.
In June, the Trump administration took steps to end human fetal research, but loopholes allow most of it to continue. In response, more than 90 research institutions wrote Secretary Azar to say fetal tissue remains an essential resource, crediting it for vaccines and potential treatments for ALS, spinal cord injuries, and Parkinson's disease. Opponents agree this is important research, but argue there are alternatives to human fetal tissue. Using it, they say, encourages late-term abortions, which produce more developed babies that are more lucrative when sold for research. That means abortion doctors receive incentives to use techniques that preserve babies and all their parts for science experiments.
So the only two ways they can do these abortions is through a live dismemberment or a medical induction, which, according to the Society of Family Planning, is very likely to produce born-alive infants.
To our core, to our founding, the recognition of the importance of life is who we are, and we can never get away from that.
Legislation has been introduced here on Capitol Hill that would prohibit the Secretary of Health and Human Services from authorizing any research that uses aborted baby parts. Research on stillbirth or miscarriage tissue would still be allowed. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Capitol Hill.
Thank you, Jennifer. Pat, I'm sure a lot of people will be shocked when they learn about these experiments.
Well, they're no more shocked than I am. Ladies and gentlemen, can you imagine our government funding a human mouse experiment? Baby parts, aborted, $120 million being spent with your money. I mean, this is monstrous. This is something out of the nightmare. I mean, even Adolf Hitler didn't do anything as bad as this. This is horrible.
Even having had that vote come from the White House against it, it still exists. It's like something that will not lay down and die.
It's just an absolute nightmare, ladies and gentlemen. And you can write your congressman and say, look, I just don't think, as the United States government, we shouldn't be spending taxpayer money. It isn't just that they're encouraging late-term abortions and paying doctors for baby parts, but that they're marrying them, trying to make a mouse human, a human mouse. I mean, this is horrible. I mean, I don't know what to say, except whatever you do, write your congressman, call your congressman, say you can't stand something like this.